Dear respected Thai, dear brothers, dear sisters, dear noble community. So today is the 10th of May in the year 2020, and we're on the eve of the end of lockdown in France. Last night I was with Lionel, and his family has been in Toulouse since the beginning of the lockdown. And so he's been practicing here, um, being with his family at a distance for the past 2 months. And this week they're coming back. They have the right to come back. And we were looking deeply into this coming out of lockdown. When news of the pandemic came to France, when we heard about the situation in Italy, suddenly everything was very simple. Just go home and stay home. And now things get more complicated because we know there's the virus is still there. It is the situation of the pandemic is still there, and we will start to move around. So as I lay in bed last night, I follow my breathing, and I felt there was something inside that was moving, some kind of agitation. It's not very strong, but it was there, and I asked myself, what is that agitation? And I practiced becoming aware of everyone in our community around the world who also are under pressure to come out of confinement, shelter in place, and face this world with new eyes and embrace fear. It's not that death is not there every day. Every day we don't know if we will make it to our bed tonight when we go to sleep. Every day we face all kinds of danger from our thinking, danger from our speech, danger from our bodily actions. And yet, because this pandemic has created a kind of collective experience of fear, suddenly the death, the possibility of illness, of death is there in front of us. So in my sleep and in my dreams, I began to embrace that agitation inside of me and see what is it that still grasps on to this life. What is it inside of me that still is holding on to this body? that still somehow wants to claim it as me, myself, and mine, and protect it from death, from illness. What is that kind of thing inside me that still believes that I am a separate self? That with the dissolution of this body, I will go back to the earth, that I'm a child of the earth, that every cell in my body, every bone in my body is made up of the earth. And just because I'm walking on the earth, because I'm talking, because I'm thinking, doesn't mean I suddenly have become separate from the earth. Every moment I'm dying. Every moment I'm living. And so Tai asked in the 2014 21-day retreat, what happens when we die? And the answer is, what happens when we live? Do we really know what is going on when we're alive? So well that we fight, that we live in constant fear of death. Do we really understand this miracle of life as something that we can appreciate fully in every moment? Do we really know what's going on? And so the practice is this invitation to go inside, to see what is really going on with this life, the living Dharma. And I woke up an hour early, around 4 o'clock in the morning, and I lay as the light just started to filter in. It's the beginning of the twilight, the sun filtering through the window. And I saw a 5-year-old child inside of me. Who had woken up in the middle of the night, who had fear of unknown dangers all around, of this pandemic, of the economic devastation it has brought about. And that 5-year-old in that moment was afraid. And he wanted to call out to Mom so that she could come in to the room and put her hand on my forehead and sit on the bed next to me. And suddenly everything would be all right. Yeah, that was a 5-year-old that manifested in the early hours of the morning. And there's also the part of me that is grown up, that knows about the world, that knows about suffering, that is strong, that can put its chest out, face the world, look the world straight in the eye, without fear. There was also that adult. And for a moment, that adult, me, wanted to push away the 5-year-old child. Wanted to put him behind. All of his weaknesses, his vulnerability, his fear of the unknown, his fear of death. So I lay there in bed and I became aware of these two parts of me, of my mind, of this proud adult who knows suffering, who has no fear, and the 5-year-old child who is seeing how long he can hold out before he calls for his mom. Maybe we can listen to the sound of the bell. So when I was in the 8th grade, it means I guess 11, 12 years old. I was very young for my my peer group. I was young for the students in my grade, and so I saw next to me all the boys growing up very tall and strong, but I was not at that point yet. It would take another year, and so I was still this small, like that. Imagine, and everyone around was going like this. The girls already were very tall, and now the boys as well. And I remember when I went to get a new haircut. This was, you have to bear with me, because this was the 1980s. And we like to put hairspray in our hair. And yeah, so I got a haircut. And I remember standing outside of the hair salon in the mall near my town, and looking at the pictures of all the different hairstyles, you know, the models that have and I was so nervous. It's like I'm choosing a new me. I see the pictures, and one of those very good-looking men with their haircuts, I would point to one of them, and then I would go inside the hair salon, and I would come out looking like that. And there was this fear of becoming something new, something unknown. Wanting to be someone, wanting to be someone maybe a little bit taller, a little bit more attractive. One of the cool guys. And so I got that haircut. And in the morning I would put the hairspray in and brush it just like that. I think it was kind of like spike. At that time, we used to spike our hair, you know. I know, it's hard to believe, but yeah, we kind of, it's like I would put the hairspray in and then comb it like this, and then the spikes would come up like this. And so you look like a porcupine a little bit, or like a durian. And yeah, so I was quite proud of my new haircut. I couldn't make myself grow taller, but I could get a new haircut. That's something I could do. And a few days after I got my new haircut, I was walking down the hall of the school, and suddenly I felt a shock on my my arm, very painful. And I turned and I saw there was one of those boys who'd already grown much bigger than me, and he had punched me in the shoulder, very strong, very hard. And I was so shocked. I tell some of the brothers, when now I live in a monastery, I'm a monk, and so I live with a lot of guys, and when I became a monk, I said I'm committing my life to the practice of non-violence. And then I sometimes saw my brothers wrestling with each other, like play wrestling. And I was always shocked. Oh my God, you're a Buddhist monk. Sometimes they pin each other down on the mattress. And they're playing, but I'm not sure sometimes. And I always ask those brothers, and sure enough, almost 100% of them, they had another brother, usually an older brother. I was the elder brother, and I had a younger sister, so we didn't wrestle very much. But when I see those brothers wrestling, I think, okay. For some of my brothers, physical violence was a daily activity. Every day you had to put out your chest and be a formidable opponent for your elder brother, or you had to put your younger brother into place. And yeah, I didn't really know that culture. And so as a 8th grader, with my new haircut, when I received that shock, that punch on my shoulder, it's like I woke up into a very bad dream. That suddenly many years of learning, of making friends, of the learning about the wonders of life in school, it suddenly took on a whole new character. Suddenly there was fear. Kind of at any moment that boy could be coming around the corner and could overpower me with his strength, overpower me with his violence. And so that was just one incident. There were other incidents. And suddenly fear became part of my daily existence. And the easy thing was to blame that boy. That is the easy way. But somehow something deep inside of me knew that it wasn't just about that boy. But I didn't have the practice yet, so I didn't have the capacity yet to see more deeply into the situation. And so I shared about I shared about the situation with my father. And my father is a large man. He played American football. And he was the epitome for me of strength, of solidity. And he shared with me his own story about when he was bullied, when there was a bully in his school, and he learned how to punch. When his father, my grandfather, taught him how to fight back. So my father took me downstairs where we had a punching bag. You know, you hang off the ceiling. And my dad taught me how to punch. This is full disclosure. I'm telling you, I'm a Buddhist monk, and I learned how to punch. But not only, my father said, don't learn just how to fight back. You learn how to punch, so you end the fight with the first punch. And so he taught me how to punch toward the nose, because then you can break his nose, and there's a lot of blood, and it's very scary, but it's actually not very serious. So that was me as a 11-year-old child learning how to punch to break another person's nose. And he said after that he won't bother you anymore. So I really didn't like the idea of punching somebody to break their nose. Actually, I really didn't like the sight of blood when I was a boy. Even now. But I was young and in a situation of fear, and I wanted to put an end to my fear. So I was ready to learn from my father how to put an end to my fear. I thought, in this way, I will show I am strong, and he will not mess with me anymore. So there's something inside of us that wants to make an enemy of our fear, to externalize it, to say that person is the source of my suffering, to point the finger of blame. There is that child inside of us that wants to point and call for our mom and dad and say, "Mom, it's not fair. It's not fair that there's a pandemic. It's not fair that there's inequality. It's not fair that we are causing a climate crisis." So what happened? So a few weeks later, I was walking into my social studies class. It's kind of like in America we call it social studies. It means you study society. Mostly it was about history. And again, out of nowhere, I suddenly felt these hands on me, and I fell down. Back, the desks at that time, I think maybe still now, they're like, the chair is attached to the table, so it's one, and so I kind of fell back. And I just remember lying there on the ground and looking up at my enemy above me, that boy. And the teacher had not yet arrived in the classroom yet. So I'm not quite sure entirely what happened next, but all I knew is I kind of launched off the ground, and I started. I didn't punch that boy, but I started pushing him, and I remember the chairs and the tables falling away, and all of the other children in the classroom falling away, and I had this rage inside, this rage of not wanting to be a victim anymore. And in that moment, I suddenly looked at my enemy, this boy, and I saw fear in his eyes. Yeah. So from being the victim, I had now made myself into the one to be feared, the one who will fight back, who will resist. And then the teacher came in the classroom and said, "What is going on here?" You know, and all I remember is that we somehow exchanged words, the way boys will do. Okay. Later on, we meet outside. And so, then words started getting around quietly, through the different boys. There's going to be a fight. And we have to get out of the school, get away from the teachers. And my heart was very, I don't even remember anything that was taught in the classroom that day. But I went outside afterwards and met that boy, and there were many other boys all around, and we pulled at each other, and we there was punching and wrestling and rolling on the ground and all kinds of things, until eventually another teacher came and separated us, and we had to go to the office, and eventually they sent us home. And I think it was the next week, we sat down with the school psychiatrist, the two of us, and I shared my side of the story. And the psychiatrist asked that boy, why did you punch him? Why did you start this thing? And he said, I didn't like his new haircut. I thought he wanted to be cool. And so, that was a story. So I didn't have much difficulty with that boy after that. And luckily I didn't have to break his nose. And he didn't break my nose. But that is a moment in my young life when I learned how overpowering fear can be, and how our mind has a tendency to point a finger, to identify the source of our fear outside of ourselves. I will never forget that moment that I saw fear in his eyes, when I suddenly pushed back, when I made myself big and strong and powerful. Because that was a moment of interbeing. Even it is a moment of fear, a moment of violence, but suddenly I saw that fear is not only located inside of me. That fear is something that also, that person who causes us harm, that person who wants to control, who wants to kill, who wants to destroy the environment, they also have fear. They also are in need of compassion and understanding. Maybe you can listen to another sound of the bell. So we live in a time when we need awakened practitioners. We need it more than ever, and the world is crying out for our practice, for our collective awakening. And as practitioners, we know we can no longer point fingers. We can no longer resort to this 5-year-old's method of calling out for our mom or our dad to make things fair. When we look into the situation of the earth, when we look deeply into Mother Earth in the present moment, and we see the climate changing, we see the pandemic, we see mass immigration, we can no longer blame the authorities, we can no longer blame the government, the corporations, the right, the left, the rich, or the poor, the other, the strangers, the immigrants. If we want to look with the eyes of understanding, then that's not sufficient anymore. We have to put away that kind of thinking. And that takes a lot of courage, because the easiest thing is to just punch back. And we can feel very righteous in doing it, because that person has done me harm, has done the earth harm. That corporation, that president, that party. We know that in the present moment, there are those who cannot yet see that clearly. And so we know that throughout our lives, as practitioners who deeply want to wake up, that we will be surrounded by those who want to blame, who, in order to to deal with the anxiety and the fear that they have in their hearts. They have not yet found another way except to blame man. But as we know from Thay's poem, man is not our enemy. Human beings are not our enemy. And that boy when I was in 8th grade was not my enemy. But that was a creation of my mind. A kind of fiction to assuage my fear. If I could only overpower that boy, then my fear will disappear. But the fear was still there. Once I asserted my strength, I asserted my power, then I needed to defend it at every moment. And if I'm not careful, the situation escalates. And then there are knives, maybe guns. Who knows? So as an 8th grader, I just got a little glimpse of that insight, but not enough yet to overcome my tendency to blame. And as I grew older and I grew to learn from the news, from history, I wanted to blame my government. I wanted to blame the capitalists. And I wanted to do away with private property. With this tendency to cling towards things as me, myself, mine. And I wanted to fight for that. Even to get arrested. I got arrested a few times. But again, I just saw that confrontation. Now it was with the police. And that confrontation became the archetype. I was resisting. I was fighting against the system. Against the manipulators. Against the controller. Against the authorities. And all the while, that authority was growing inside of me. That policeman was also like a mirror image of my external self, was being nourished inside of me. That person who needed to control, who needed to be the one who delivered the violence, the one who controlled the world. That is the nature of the struggle. We struggle against the mirror within ourselves. So like this morning when I had that vulnerable 5-year-old child and the adult in me wanted to push him away, like two mirror images, a dualism within my mind. The weak and the strong. The powerful and the weak. But fortunately, I learned how to breathe and let go of my idea about myself. My idea that I am a 5-year-old child that is weak and vulnerable, and my idea that I am a strong adult who has no fear. I'm able to let go of both of those ideas. Let go of my fear about the death of this body. Let go of my fear about being unknown, being unappreciated. Because I know from my teacher, from the Buddha, from Thai, that it is only through letting go that I can really touch non-fear. It is not through just sticking my chest out, making myself strong, trying to control the world, that I overcome my fear. But it is rather by letting go of this body, these feelings, these perceptions, these thoughts as me, myself, and mine. And seeing that this experience of the present moment is merely a stewardship of this body. I am just taking care of this body. And this body is not separate from Mother Earth. And that if I know how to breathe, if I know how to walk on the earth with freedom, free from my projects, my worries, my fear that I will lose myself, my fear that I will not be someone, like that boy who wanted the haircut, to become someone cool, someone important, someone who has a meaning, a genius. All these ideas we have about reality, about ourselves. They are all barriers, kind of fortifications in a really useless fight against death, against impermanence, against the constantly being born and constantly dying nature of the present moment. In the Buddha's time, there were rulers who created armies that massacred civilians. There were merchants full of greed and hatred. And today, we have rulers who have amassed armies, professional armies. And young men and women are deployed around the world to fight against the other, against the unknown, against other ideologies. And there are those of us who arrange ourselves in groups and corporations that amass wealth, that take of the earth and claim it as mine, my own. We extract minerals from the surface of the earth. We extract petrochemicals from underneath, ancient sunlight from underneath the earth, and burn it. Now we are even going into the bottoms of the ocean in our endless quest to extract more from the lining of our mother's uterus, more nutriment. We are all these things. We are the government, we are the authorities, amassing armies, we are the corporations. They're not somebody else. Through what we eat, the phones we use, the cars we drive, the planes we fly in, That is the eyes of non-self. We can no longer allow ourselves to be carried away by the convenient fiction that we are separate, that we are somehow above all of that. When we look deeply, we see that we see our collective humanity, and not only as human beings, but also as living beings on the planet Earth. As I walked up to the Dharma hall this morning, I heard the nightingales singing. And I know the male nightingales, they love to sing in the daytime and at night. This spring we have many all over Upper Hamlet. And if you have your door open and you lay awake at night, you can hear them singing, calling out for the mate to come. And the song fills us with beauty and wonder. And it is also a warning to the other males. Don't come near here. This is my private property. A few days ago, we were eating lunch in Shunha, and there was a hoverfly. I don't know if you've seen the hoverfly. The way they call for a mate is they just hover there. They try to stay in one place without moving as long as possible. And if another hoverfly comes into that space, it chases it out, and then it goes right back to that point. And then another one comes, and you just see it hovering there, hovering. And the idea is that the fly that can maintain the most stability will get the mate. It's a holding pattern. It's holding its private property. So it is not, this tendency is not merely human to claim the earth as our own, to claim this patch of land as me, myself, mine. But we also see it in our animal cousins. Even the trees are staking out their space. But if we look deeply, we can learn how to transform that energy. So as monastics, as monks and nuns in Plum Village, we let go of having a family. We let go of having a career, a job, a salary, a car, because we have had an experience of non-self, an experience of our body, an experience of awakening, where we no longer want to cling to things as our own. We know that modern governments give us the right to claim private property, but we decide to let go of that claim because we have a deeper vision of our experience of being on this earth, that we are not just this body, that we are the earth. And yet we do not claim it as our own. We do not need to claim it because it is in every cell of our body. How can we claim something that is already there in the present moment? Why do we need to control it? What is that fear? That fear of someone larger than us, overpowering us, taking away our food to eat, taking away our mate, taking away our bed to sleep in, our safe corner of the earth, to feel protected, to feel like a safe 5-year-old lying in bed with his mother's hand on his forehead. So as friends on the path, we let go of all that need, but we still know that we are human, that we have that 5-year-old child inside. And so together we make the commitment to embrace our fear with mindfulness, to no longer allow ourselves to be carried away by the agitation, the anxiety, but rather to bring up the seed of mindfulness, that same mindfulness that we apply to our in and out breath, and we shine it with all of its brilliance upon that scary, painful emotion, those corners of our mind that are full of hatred, that are full of rage, that are overwhelmed with the situation of injustice. And we see that the perpetrator is also us. The manipulator is also us. We want to point the finger at social media, at the nefarious hackers in another country. But we don't want to look at our own selves. That the possibility that the greatest menace is here within our own heart. That the enemy that we are wanting to point the finger at outside is living inside of us. The one who is flying on the planes, the one who is driving the car, the one who is eating, the flesh of Mother Earth. And that there's a possibility to embrace that perpetrator, that manipulator, that enemy inside of us, that monster, that shining the light of mindfulness on it, we can hold it. We can learn to begin anew with our enemy. Tai told many times the story of, in the Buddhist tradition we talk about Mara. It's like Mara is the epitome of all things unpleasant, all things that cause suffering. Yeah. So in the Buddhist community, just like in everywhere, sometimes we need to explain things in an overly simplistic way, just to help people to get on the path. And so we know many of the monks and nuns, they didn't have the chance to have much education. And so there was a tendency to talk about this Mara, kind of like in Christianity, we tell stories about Satan. Yeah, it's a simplistic way of talking about things. And so Mara is the one who is causing all the craving, all the desire, all the ignorance, all the hatred. And when we become realized practitioners, then we see that Mara is in our heart. But for the sake of a story, we can put Mara outside. And so one day, the Buddha was sitting there with Ananda, his dutiful attendant, and he sees Mara coming. And he thinks, wow, what is Mara coming here for? we are monks. We have gotten rid of Mara. He has no place here. And then just in line with his fear, Mara starts walking right towards him and the Buddha. And yeah, you can imagine like snakes coming out of his head and, fire breathing, whatever you like. Mara's really unpleasant and ugly. And Mara is coming straight for the Buddha. And so Ananda stands in his way and says, "What are you doing here, Mara? You have no right to be here. We are mindfulness practitioners. We are free from your influence. And you are the Buddha's enemy." And then even when Ananda said it, he wanted to take back his word. He knew it was not quite right. And then Mara heard him and said, "Oh, the Buddha has an enemy. Oh, really?" And of course, Ananda was caught then. He knew that with the teaching of non-self, if he looks deeply, there can be, the Buddha doesn't have an enemy. But even our fear, our anger are also the compost that we use to bring about compassion and understanding. And so Ananda was caught. And so the Mara told Ananda, "Please, could you go to the Buddha? I would like to have tea with him." And so kind of gritting his teeth, Ananda went and to the Buddha and said, Buddha, I'm so sorry, but I know you're so busy, you have so many projects, I know you're working on a new book, and there are many things that you need to do, but because the Buddha is a very busy spiritual teacher, he has many disciples he needs to take care of. And why should he use any of his free time to sit with Mara? But gritting his teeth and doing his teacher's bidding, he went and he invited Mara to come in. And so you can imagine the Buddha sitting there calm and serene, and then Mara with like snakes coming out of his head and fire coming out of his mouth and kind of goat horns and I don't know what else you want to have. Sitting there, smelling, very smelly, very unpleasant, really bad breath. And here's the Buddha, offering some tea. Actually, in the Buddha's time, they didn't drink tea because tea hadn't come to India yet. But this is a story, so let's imagine that the Buddha is sitting there with tea. And he offers a cup to Mara. He says, "Mara, how's it going?" And this is a Buddha with modern dialect. And Mara says, "Not so well. All of my disciples, they complain, all the time they say, we want to practice mindfulness, Mara. We want to learn mindful walking. We want to learn how to dwell happily in the present moment. It's really annoying. They all want to become like mindfulness practitioners. They're supposed to be like going around and having sex with other people's wives and, stealing things and killing people. And instead they just want to practice mindful walking. I mean, I don't know what's going on. It's some kind of weird revolution." And the Buddha said, "Mara, I think I know about your suffering. I also have a lot of problems with my disciples. They just repeat back to me everything I say over and over, exactly word for word like I said it, but they don't really practice. They just go off and get alms with lots of really good food, and then they sit there and they get really fat. And they sit around the temple and they get lots of donations. And they say, I'm a Buddhist. and they bow to the Buddha and they offer like a fistful of incense. So it like gets really smoky and I can't even breathe in my own Buddha hall. Can you imagine that? So much smoke and I can't even breathe in my own Buddha hall. So this is the Buddha and Mara commiserating with each other. And Mara said, I have an idea, Buddha. Why don't we switch places? I can become the Buddha, and you can become Mara. And Ananda was there outside, and he heard this conversation, and suddenly he became very afraid. What if the Buddha said yes? Yeah. What if Mara becomes my teacher? So that is the story of Buddha and Mara. And if we look inside ourselves, we can see that Buddha is there, but Mara is also there. And actually, they are not. They are not two. So we are both the one who suffers from the climate crisis, and we are the one who causes it. We are the one who lives in poverty, that is the victim of violence. And we are also the one who causes the violence. We are the one who perpetrates the control. That is the insight of interbeing. So as we go out of this lockdown, we are invited to look deeply into our heart and practice beginning anew with Mother Earth. To really realize our inheritance as children of the earth. That it's not enough to blame Mara. That it's not enough to blame the government, to blame the authorities, to blame the social media. That it's time to re-establish our sovereignty in the present moment. So the keystone of Plum Village practice is, I have arrived, I am home. It means we arrive back to everything in the present moment. It means the violence and fear and the happiness. But we know that as we are on the path, that we want to nourish the positive seeds. So that is why we have a Sangha. Because if we only nourish ourselves with the suffering, with the pain, that we can easily be overwhelmed. So we practice as a Sangha. But we don't continue to point fingers at anyone outside of ourselves. We have to grow up, but still allow ourselves to embrace the vulnerable 5-year-old child and see that it and us are not two. That is the interpenetration of our vulnerability and our strength without any resistance, without any struggle. So our solidity and our freshness are both present. They do not fight against one another. Our freedom, our happiness, and our fear, our uncertainty about the future, our anxiety. We embrace it all. Yeah. You see everything. You let it all in with the practice of inclusiveness. It's very powerful. All of the worst atrocities that have been committed by human beings are there in our heart. And all of the most powerful, transformative acts of kindness are also there. They are both represented within the human heart, within this heart. That is such a powerful experience. Because as long as we don't accept everything, we cannot transform. We cannot heal the earth. We have to, we cannot rely only on charismatic leaders anymore. We need to be realized practitioners, even if it's only a part-time Buddha. We need to walk solidly on the earth and bring about healing. We can no longer continue to just blame and judge the other. So that is the invitation. That is what I felt as I lay in bed and I embraced the anxiety of coming out of lockdown. We are entering into a world that is no less complex. And with its complexity, it requires a deep practice, a deep awakening. And we cannot do it alone. We need a sangha. We need a collective brothers and sisters by our side, supporting us. We are not caught in our view. We are learning how to dwell happily in the present moment. Because the world needs free and happy practitioners. That is a deep, urgent need. Not the people just repeating about the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Noble Path. Those things are wonderful. But we need to realize that in our heart. That is the living Dharma. So it's not just in a book. The Dharma is not just something you find in the bookstore. But it is something we find in our heart. We take refuge in the Dharma in our heart, in ourselves. That is what Thai invites us to do. To realize brotherhood and sisterhood here and now in the Sangha, so that we can be an inspiration to others, to let go of their fear, to embrace it with mindfulness, and transform it into a great bodhisattva action. So I wish you a lot of realized awakening on the path, and a lot of joy, even with our 5-year-old who still has his fear, that quiet, scared boy inside of us. You can allow him to be there, but learn to embrace him and heal it. Learn to be also the mother with the calm, warm hand who quiets the anxiety. Because we need more of you. We need more kind of realized, free and happy, two-legged creatures walking on the earth. Thank you for your deep listening and your practice.